folks, welcome back to another Besides the Norm podcast. My name's Steve. We've got Craig on the other side of the table. Another exciting podcast this week. We have Don Marshall from the Scottish Family Party. How are you doing, Don?
I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. You've got one of those great names that just fluidly comes off the tongue. It's perfect. Yeah. Really great name for me.
I'm third generation of Don Marshall as well. So my grandfather and my father were all Don Marshalls, yeah.
So you have
Donald Marshalls.
Do you have the three lines after your name then, usually?
I could do, but there's only one of the other left. My grandfather died about 2 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, I'd be probably or junior if I was American, I suppose.
Mm. I love that, the junior name. Everybody just calls
Junior.
Everybody just calls you Junior instead of any part of your name at all. They just ignore everything else.
Always got confusing at Christmas when we were all together. And someone said Don, and then at least two people would answer. Someone said Donald, at least two would answer. But we got there.
Amazing. It's amazing.
This is where I like nicknames. Because my nickname is Monk. And there's very few monks.
Monk.
Because you used to count
It was worse than the other side. When the other side of the family got together, because there was two Ronalds on that side. So there was three Donalds and two Ronalds. So.
Oh my God. That sounds painful.
Original Scottish names, that's what it is.
Ron and Don. Don and Ron. My God. Unbelievable. So, we've got you on to talk
the podcast.
That's a great start. This is how these things go. So we've got you on to talk about the upcoming election and sort of your thoughts on it, some of your policies and stuff like that. But first, we'll go into about your childhood. How's your childhood done?
Well, my dad was in the military. He was in the Royal Air Force, so I kind of moved around a little. Spent a few years in Germany when I was quite young. Spent originally from Dundee, so I was born in Dundee. My family was all from Dundee, so we ended back there a couple of times on and off during the years. But most of my time growing up was up in Elgin, in the far north of Scotland. Mm-hmm. I was there from about age 7 to about 12. So that's kind of where I grew up, which was, when I was up there, I kind of spoke out the broad Scots. You can fit 'em down, and you fit your down, you go like a loon, and all that kind of speak, which was interesting. But when I was 12, my dad got posted down to England, so I moved. I was in primary 7 on the Friday up in Scotland, and then I moved down to England. And went straight into first year because the school system's different, and nobody could understand a word I said. Obviously, even the Dundonians wouldn't have understood a word I said, or anywhere around there, anywhere else in Scotland. But I went there, just couldn't understand me. But I didn't understand that because I'd seen EastEnders and I could understand all of them perfectly.
It's a thing we come up against a lot. We do another podcast, which is a hip hop podcast. We speak to people from all over the world. We spoke to Australians, Americans, guys from just in London. We understand all them.
And their slang a lot
and
of
their
the
slang,
well.
we have to get in touch with hip hop slang terms and
but
stuff
we have
like that.
Slight different pronunciations of certain words, and they just can't grasp it.
Particularly the word purple.
The word purple
that seems to be a huge argument.
Specifically with Americans. Americans don't understand the word purple.
Yeah.
I don't know how they say it.
Because it's just purple. It just sounds stupid.
It's mauve, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Stick to mauve. Yeah, so down in England, and I spent about a year down there because my dad wasn't keen on the education system in England. He thought, and quite rightly so at that time, that the education system in Scotland was far better. And being an officer now in the military, he was able to get me into the boarding school in Dunblane. I don't know if you know, it's called Queen Victoria School.
I've never heard of it, no.
No, it's just on the A9 as you're coming down the hill towards Dunblane. There's something that looks like a borstal on the left-hand side.
All right.
It's a bit like Castle Huntly. That's what it was like, and it was a bit like that being at school. It was a bit like being in the army at age 13, and we were watching a black and white film one Saturday afternoon, and it was about a borstal. And when we looked, we saw that the kids in this borstal were wearing the same uniform we were.
Oh.
So we all wondered whether we were a borstal or not.
I wonder if that was planned.
I think it was when it's a military place, it's probably the only government issue closed that they had for kids. So it kind of makes sense, really. But yeah. But, it was a tough school. It was like being in the military. You did cadets, but, some people thrived and some people didn't. Interestingly, there's been quite a bit in the news about child abuse at boarding schools around Scotland at the time I was there.
Right.
And my school has been dragged into it. But I mean, I never saw and witnessed any kind of child abuse from adults or teachers. Plenty of bullying between pupils and things at the time, and corporal punishment was still allowed, but no, nothing like that. So.
I think again they're going.
We had to play rugby.
I mean, those kind of people are going to pick their people, and then they're just like everybody else gets left out, sort of thing. So it's just going to be kept really quiet between each other, sort of thing.
Aye.
So
yeah,
sorry,
but they did make us play rugby, so I suppose that was a form of child abuse.
It certainly is.
I had the opposite issue. I wanted to play rugby and wasn't allowed. So I'm going to take that as child abuse.
Aye.
I blame that today for why I'm fat.
Because you weren't allowed to play rugby?
Because I wasn't allowed to do PE stuff.
Yeah, that's a horrible thing, that. So at school, so what happened after that? Like, what led you into the political side of things after that?
Sorry, the
political. What led you? What did something happen in school that led you into politics or anything like that?
Well, no. Well, I mean, I suppose so. After I left school, I went to college in Dundee to study business studies with languages. I always wanted to learn languages and go abroad, and my parents were in Germany at the time, so that was kind of my interest. I wanted to be a manager. But whilst I was at the student, I did get involved in the National Union of Students, student union at the time, and got involved in a number of things. And it was right at the time of the poll tax. I mean, I'm going back a while. This is late 80s, because I'm 51 years old, so it's a wee while back, before you guys will probably remember. But so it was a time of Margaret Thatcher, the poll tax demonstrations, and they were testing out in Scotland, and it was quite a time of discontent. And so I was involved in that. I was like the secretary for the college on the union, and it was something that I was interested in at the time. And then I did join the SNP at the time. Back then, it were campaigning for devolution. So for me, devolution was, the goal was to get Scotland its own parliament. And I met Donald Dewar at the time as well, and he did actually see that to come to fruition, which was really good. But so that's the only time that I was been involved in politics in the whole of my life until a couple of years ago when I came back to Scotland. Because after I'd been a student, I went abroad and I lived in France and Germany for a few years.
Right, yeah.
So in that time there was no politics until you came back. So what made you get back involved? Well,
the reason I got back involved is when returned to Scotland. So I've been living in England for I left in '89, and this was 2018. So 29 years I'd been away, abroad, and then back in England, working for various big companies, IKEA, B&Q, Dunelm Mill, people like that. And then a job came up that took me back to Scotland, and it was too good an opportunity. It wasn't. I was working in e-commerce for a company based in Kinross, and it meant I could move back to where I was from and be close to my dad, and it just seemed well. My wife was, my wife's from Africa, and she always loved coming to Scotland, and it was our intention to move back, but probably not at that point in time. But when it all happened, it kind of all fell into place. We came back, and so when you're in England, what you see in the political scheme and what you see of Scotland as a country, it looks to be doing, pretty well. You see, the Scottish government kind of being strong with Nicola Sturgeon, and they don't see any depth beyond that. So I was quite, a fan of what was happening. I'd seen new schools being built. I'd seen the infrastructure doing pretty well. Everything seemed okay. But but my dad was always anti-SNP and what was going on in the country. And I couldn't understand this until I came back and I saw from my own eyes. And what I saw was that the schools and education, I mentioned it earlier, that when I was sent back to school in Scotland, because it was such a good education, but it had definitely gone so far backwards it was unrecognisable, and that there was also a number of, my daughter started school. I was even to look at what was being taught, and there was a number of what I'd call as age inappropriate sex education being taught, at the same time parental rights being eroded. So the way I saw was the SNP policies weren't working, but I did join the SNP when I came back. That was, when I came back, I don't know what it was. I was reminded of the reason why I was in politics before, and I'd never had an interest in that whole time in between, and it suddenly just, I kind of had almost like a revelation. I was in church one day, and the guy was preaching, and he said, that you got a memory or something that you want to do when you're younger, and unlock it and go for it. And I suddenly got this, sounds strange to you guys probably, but I had this revelation that I needed to get into politics and try and change something. So I joined the SNP, thinking that was the right way. Let's get involved. Let's try and work your way, from inside. And I couldn't get anywhere. And the way that things were organised and stuff, there was no chance of me getting involved in politics at all with them. There was no door open at all. So yeah, and I was a member, but I kind of gave up, and that wasn't what was happening, And then just one day on Facebook, along came a video from Richard Lucas, the leader of the Scottish Family Party, that made quite a lot of sense about certain things and kind of spoke to some of my values. And then I looked at the policies and showed them to my wife, and it's kind of like, these just kind of fit with what we believe in a lot of ways. I mean, not everything. I don't think anyone will find a party or any organisation that 100% aligned with everything you believe in, but it was pretty close, and I made contact, and things just grew from there.
Yeah, that's been a pretty common thing with cause we've spoken to, I think you're the sixth or seventh candidate we've spoken to for this election period, and it's quite a common theme that people say you never believe everything that a party stands for, but you find the closest thing. Yeah, that's a pretty common thing.
Yeah, because I mean, I became when I met my wife, I became a Christian in 2017. So some of those values are important to me, obviously. And although the party is not a Christian party, as such, that is founded by a number of Christians on Christian values, which to some may be old-fashioned, but to many it does speak sense, and it's about protecting the way that things should be, and having religious freedom of expression, and obviously that things like freedom of speech on some of the things you agree in as well. So some of those was there, and there's quite a lot of material that they looked into and didn't agree with some of the sex education stuff. So that's kind of what drew me towards it. And I was quite appalled at what was being taught. And I'd seen that in England there'd been a lot of publicity around Birmingham and the sex education that they were trialling in Birmingham, and the Muslim community was up in arms and withdrawing the children from school. And it's quite a big thing in the media there, but it was only a trial curriculum that they were doing in Birmingham. What I found here was that almost the same curriculum was actually in place in Scotland and being taught in many, many schools. So that was quite shocking to me.
Can I ask, sorry, did you have a question, Craig?
I've got a couple, but you can...
I want to ask you about the sex education issue. What was the specific issue that you had with the sex education?
It's introducing quite a lot of things that are, for me, it was age inappropriate. And I'll give you a couple of examples, maybe, see if I can. Mm-hmm. So there's things aimed at in primary 2 and primary 3, which is sort of 6 to 7 year olds that actually go into how babies are made, and it actually goes into quite a bit of detail about bodies and genitals and about sex, which 6 to 7 is for me it's just a little bit young, and it's some of the in-depth things that they do at that point of time, I think is just a little bit early. They also introduce the sort of the difference and talk about lesbian, gay, and heterosexual and bisexual. And whilst it's it is appropriate to to educate children at a certain time, about what is real, what is real life is like, and what they'll encounter. I just think the age of it for me is a little bit too early.
I was always led. I'm not in school, and I don't have kids, so I have no idea really what the curriculum is. But I was led to believe that at those ages they were teaching about romantic relationships as opposed to sexual relationships. Is that not the case?
Yeah. Well, it does. At that age, I mean, you have to kind of dig quite deep into the material. And I think it's hard to say because they talk about people being bisexual and they talk about love, and about being in the same sex. So it doesn't tend to talk in that context in the LG lesbian, gay, and bisexual side. But in the part that talks about how babies are made, it does go a fair bit into it. I mean, a bit. Just quoting from it, says one way that the woman and man love each other as if they have sex, and this is a special thing to do that grown-ups can do. And when they have sex, the man's penis goes inside the woman's vagina, sperm comes out and goes to meet the egg inside the woman's body. And so, I mean, different people. Some people might think that's fine, but I and my wife, but we wouldn't, at age 6 or 7. Wouldn't be wanting that detail explained to our daughter. There's a time when questions will be asked and you answer, and I suppose everyone will debate what is the appropriate age and appropriate time. But for me, that's what it was. And some of the images used, even when you get to P5 and P7, there's some, could be some quite graphic images of naked bodies, which, it could, but that's my view on it. So not everyone will hold the same view, and I totally understand that. And that's just why I wanted to challenge and get involved in challenging, the material and making sure that it is age appropriate. Yeah.
So this is just purely curiosity. So if your daughter asked you, I don't know what age your daughter is, but assuming your daughter was the age that you were discussing there, the 7-8-year-old mark, how would you answer that question if she was to ask?
I'd pass it over to the mother to answer, I'd pass the buck in that as well. I'd see the thing is, I wouldn't get that kind of question from our daughter at that age. That's the thing. I suppose if she did, I mean, that's a theoretical. I mean, I was married before, so I have 2 older children. So This is the 3rd time I've been through that age. And, it wasn't, my other 2, it wasn't until they were in their early teens that they were wanting and looking to discuss or had questions about those things. Right. So, and that's not long ago. So that for me, it was, I wouldn't have expected that question. I would have been quite shocked and wondered, well, how did she get the concept of that? I mean, people talk about, she knows about babies being made and put in the tummy, but they don't know about, kids at that age shouldn't really know about sex. It's not there. My wife, early age has explained about the dangers, and I understand that some of the RHSP documentation and stuff that's used in school is about teaching kids to be safe, and about they have this no pants rule. People shouldn't touch you any in your pants area and things like that. And these are all good things. So not all of it is bad, and it's about getting the balance right for me.
Okay, that's fair. Sorry, when you go.
But I thought you were going to ask something, so I stepped back. So the assumption would be this is based on American family parties. They I don't know if you know much about them, but they tend to be explicitly homophobic and against sort of gay adoption and things like that. Is that similar to the family party in Scotland?
I would say that the conservative view that the party have, that there is some correlation with that. But as far as being homophobic, I've heard people accuse the party of that, but I haven't met anyone who actually is. I think what the party wants to do is to get balance right, and for what the moment we seem to have a big amount of LGBT content across the curriculum in every subject, and there's this LGBT inclusiveness, so that there's no. If it was just in sex education, for example, a parent who didn't, had religious beliefs and didn't want their child taught that could take them out of that class. But when it's across every subject and included into that, then that makes it difficult for the parent to have that choice.
Yeah. Even maths.
Yeah, that's what it says in the documentation is the curriculum has to go across. I mean, I understand that there's a need to educate and explain to children what these things are at certain ages and certain points. I understand that there is a problem that kids who are LGBT in schools have had problems of bullying and harassment, and that's not something that we would ever condone in any way. No one should be something like that. But for me, when you have a problem, you need to deal with it. But when you use a sledgehammer to crack a nut, then you get bits all over the place, and that's the problem that I see here is that, and this is me speaking, is that if there's a problem, then it does need to be tackled. But I think introducing, so if there was a class that had some children in the class whose parents were in same-sex relationships, then the children may be asking questions, may be confused, and they may need explaining that that's perfectly normal. That's how it is. But if a child's never had any concept of that, I think telling them too young what those things are, they don't quite understand. It doesn't make sense to them. So I think leaving some of these things till they're older is the right thing.
Okay. So the reason I asked that is because, as I say, you're something like the 6th candidate we've interviewed like this week, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people, and it's mostly me that does the looking through manifestos and things, and so it's hard to get a proper grasp of manifestos and policy positions based on a couple of days. And I was looking through and I couldn't find anything that was homophobic on the website. But the second part that I'm curious about is whether you're against sort of gay adoption or same-sex adoption.
Well, the party's policy on the same-sex adoption is that they believe, and this is going to the family being the fundamental unit of society, being the building blocks of society, that the families need to be encouraged and supported. Now, in that, ideally, and this is why we get the party gets called homophobic or anti, is that ideally a child should be brought up, and the best example is with a mother and a father. There are examples, and there's been studies on the family to say that children in stable married relationships do a lot better than if they've got a mother and a father. And there has been some studies, and I'm not going to be able to kind of to quote them all as such, but for me, that's what most families are. And there has been instances, I suppose, where when it comes to adoption, that there's been families denied adoption, and first it's getting the balance right. It does say in the policy that they should get someone who's in a stable relationship as a husband and wife should get preference because they're in that relationship. So yeah, I mean there is an element of that, but we're not saying that it's not that. For me, I would never say that a gay couple should never adopt. I mean, if a child gets a stable family environment, then there are other families available, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But our preferred way is and it's a Christian ethos to it, is that a mother and a father is meant to be the fundamental family unit of society. But in this modern age, others do exist, and we do acknowledge that. And we're nowhere trying to be prejudiced against anyone, or there's certainly no hatred involved, which we do get accused of. For me, it's never been our way. If you've got a Christian ethos, then tolerating and trying to understand and to love everybody is the way it is. Hatred should never come into it.
So just to go back slightly, did you ever look into I think it's the Scottish Christian Party?
I did look a little bit. I mean, I'm aware of them, but I didn't look in any depth towards them, just because they had no real presence.
Yeah.
I know they had one or two different candidates in Scotland that they were just very small and didn't have any inroads to do anything. But yeah, I didn't really look in depth at them. No.
Yeah, I've seen them a couple of times, and I've never spoken to anyone from them. I don't know anything about them.
Are they standing this year?
I don't know. Not in Mid Fife in Scotland.
Right.
Mid Scotland and Fife. So I was just curious if since you're a Christian, you're in a party that's founded mostly by Christians and things. I thought you might have looked into them, might be able to say sort of why you didn't join them and join with somebody else. But that's fine. So
yeah, they had no presence, and I think for me it was that the Scottish family ticked many of the boxes of things that I was interested in.
Yeah.
But one of the things there's a couple of things I've worked hard on within the party, and I joined it about 2 years ago, and I'm now the deputy chairman. So it was initially for a long while, Richard's party, but now it's grown. There's a number of members and people, and it's evolving. And I've worked hard on making sure that we tried to remove anything that seemed that it was be prejudicial or anti any type of group. And try and make sure that we are open. And so to all. It's not meant to be exclusive to only Christians or only people with certain views. We will develop as we get more mature as a party.
So you said you joined the SNP a couple of times. So before you left Scotland and then when you came back, did the Scottish Family Party have a position on independence or Devo Max or like federalism as Labour and Tories and things talk about sometimes, or Lib Dems even, not Tories?
Yeah, I mean the party, the line in it is we're neutral on independence. It's not one of our main policies, and it's not something that we campaign on. The view is that we had the referendum in 2014, and that was meant to be once in a lifetime, and that should be respected. We do understand, and if the popular opinion of the country was that a referendum was demanded, then obviously we would support whatever happened at that point. But we're quite strongly in the situation at this moment in time that because of the economic conditions that we're in, that it's not the right time that we should be looking to even have a discussion or a referendum or anything at this point in time. We need to get the country back on their path to recovery, and really it needs to get a full term of Parliament away before we kind of put it back on the table at all. Because I think that the economy after pandemic, we've got a lot of rebuilding to do in the country, and I don't think an independent Scotland under an SNP government would make Scotland prosper. Personally, my own opinion that I want what's best for Scotland. I'm always been proud of being a Scot, and wherever I've gone abroad and stuff, I've worn my kilt and flown the flag, and I'm very proud Scot. I want what's best for the country, and at the moment, I wouldn't say that an SNP government and independence would be the best thing.
So the assumption would be normally, based on the first question I asked about what family party means in other parts of the world, it generally seems like a right-wing concept. But I looked at some of the sort of immigration policies, and you're very pro-refugees and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, we're not... some of the policies may seem quite right-wing or on the view, and I think there's been a lot of people, I've seen people referencing us to being like UKIP, and I say we're nothing like that at all. We have a number of Muslim and BAME members in the party, and like I said, my wife is from Africa, so myself, I'm in a mixed race relationship, and I wouldn't join and get involved in a party that was anything against immigration or that as well. I mean, I think they talk about supporting the countries where the immigrants come from rather than us just pulling away all the talented resource. It's probably one of the most controversial. But as a country, we need to maintain population, and there are two ways of doing that. And one is to grow families and have children, that's why we're pro-family, and the other is to allow the right level of immigration that the country needs for the right reasons. So we're certainly not against that. I know that there's a test you can do. I can't remember for the life of me what it was called, but there's a test that you can do about your political views, and it puts you on a scale. And I know that Richard and several of us in the party did it, and most of us were slightly libertarian, slightly conservative libertarian more than anything, but almost smack bang in the middle. I think we're people we're a party of individuals that care about people and about things.
We interviewed an independent. We interviewed an independent candidate a couple of days ago, and she was from, I think, Kenya, and she was an asylum seeker, and she explained the process in a way that I'd never experienced before. So I've always been pro-asylum seeker, pro-immigration. I've always been on that side of things. But I never understood just how bad that system is. And any party that's in favour of treating people with respect is fine with me in that regard.
Yeah. No, I'm quite well connected within the Black African community across the whole UK. I'm very well known within it. So for me, it's important to get that mix, and it's important to get it's good for Scotland, good for the culture, to bring people in. And actually, I mean, my wife herself I don't believe she's counted any open racism at all in Scotland, which is, I'm quite proud of that. Unfortunately, my daughter has in school, and so there has been some issues there because my daughter is, she's black, so she has had some comments and things made against her, and it was quite funny because someone called her black and she said, "But I'm brown." She had no concept of black, and this is just before the Black Lives Matter type thing.
Right.
So I mean, for me, there's racism in the schools, and it's the issue of race and educating people about race. But I know we talked earlier about the LGBT and the LGBT inclusiveness they're trying to do across every curriculum and that. But why choose only the LGBT topic and bullying and the issues that they face, and why not look at racism in exactly the same way? So for me, it's the inconsistency that one area has been picked to deal with in a certain way and the other hasn't. So let's educate everyone in the same way in different things. Let's not just focus on one area, and that's part of the problem that we have and I have.
I want to cover a couple of things, like we were sort of talking back and forward on the emails before. These are quite important things that I think we should cover. So one of the things you mentioned when you were in an abusive marriage, I'm guessing this is not the recent one. I'm guessing this was...
No.
So could you go into details, like what happened with this?
For legal reasons, I have to be careful because there's privacy, and I can potentially share something different with you afterwards but not publicly. Okay. I'll share something with you afterwards. I'll share your link to something I can tell you. But no, I was in a marriage, and for 20 years I was married, and the first 10 were okay. But my ex-wife was kind of, I would say she was always the one that you would say the one that wears the trousers. I was under the thumb. She was quite strong-willed and bossy, but she changed at one point, and there was something that happened that kind of changed her, and she became more aggressive. And when you come across domestic abuse, there are all different forms of domestic abuse, and over a number of years, I was subjected to them all. But as a man, in a I wasn't particularly Christian at the time, but I did believe in marriage, and I did not want to give up, and I did want to fight, and I had my children to look after and walk away. But several times I tried to move on and leave, and couldn't get away. And when you're in an abusive relationship, there's something called codependency, and that's why when someone's in an abusive, and I hear people say, "Oh, why doesn't she just leave him? Why? Because he knows what he's like." And it's not that easy. There's so many other complexities. And when I came out of that marriage, my self-esteem, I'd been depressed. had suicidal thoughts at times, and I was not in a very, very good place. But I just wanted to get back on the horse and get out there, and I started dating, and I met my new wife, and my life is completely changed and completely different. Mm-hmm. And for me, when it comes to marriage and families, I'm quite unique in our party in that I'm divorced, but so I understand what divorce does to a family, how it rips and breaks it apart, and the pain that people go through. So that's I don't wish that on anyone, but I also understand there are reasons why marriages break down. So and why you do get single parents, why you do have that. Unfortunately, in society, it is socially more acceptable and legally more easily able to break up marriages. And I think putting in more to support marriages and counselling would help. But I also noticed that there was very little help for men. So this was a number of years ago that that happened. So looking at 10 years ago, there was very little resource for a male victim of domestic abuse to go to. You're pretty much laughed at. And I went to court and I wasn't believed. So it's I've been involved with trying to support and get some gender parity there, so that on the domestic abuse side, that a male voice is heard as well. So it was not an easy time, but coming out of it, I'm so much stronger. And I work with men. I try to support men who've been through this. I also support women as well. And for me, it's given me a passion to help people.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
I think there's been a big shift in
I was just about to say
male
that
victims, especially from female abusers to male abusees. Victims. Let's say that. I don't know what the word is. But especially like lately with the Johnny Depp situation and things, there seems to be more support for male victims than there used to be, and I think that's great. Any sort of victim should be supported.
Definitely.
Yeah, there is. I mean, in Scotland, there's an organisation called Abused Men in Scotland, and I've had some contact with them and try to support them, and they have a helpline. But this is the problem: is they get no funding whatsoever from the Scottish government, whereas Women's Aid and other several ones get hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions, spread across different agencies. So it's just that kind of disparity. So there is more help there. It is more socially acceptable to stand up and say, yeah, I was in an abusive relationship. There should be no shame, because it can happen to men as well as women. And the situation, and I've spoken with many women, and many women have kind of understood my story, and I've been able to share with them, and they say it's exactly the same. So there's no difference between a male or female victim. What they endure, what they go through, is exactly the same. Maybe the physical side isn't quite as dangerous, technically, because the men could be stronger. So on both sides, you can take more, you can give more, and that's the problem. But the actual psychological and emotional and other effects are almost exactly the same. So raising awareness and getting men to talk about it is one of the things I've been trying to do.
Another one of the things you mentioned was your heart attacks and stuff like that. Could you go into that a wee bit as well?
Yeah. Probably,
sorry to bring all this up, by the way, but
no. I'm very happy to talk about this. I mean, in 2018, I went through 6 heart attacks, and it was misdiagnosed after several times. I had 3 at work. Went to the doctor, and he said, "Oh, it's indigestion," and gave me some omeprazole.
Indigestion.
And then indigestion, and it was 3 heart attacks, and then I had another one that night, and thought nothing of it because the doctor said it's indigestion. The weekend I had another one. I went to A&E, and they messed up the test, and they said, no, it's nothing to do with your heart. It did get me back to another clinic, who then discharged me and said there's nothing to your heart. And then on the following Saturday night, I was watching The Voice. I was sitting having a drink, glass of red wine, because it'd be good for my heart, and watching The Voice, and then had another heart attack. I never knew that The Voice was so dangerous. It gave me a heart attack. So ended up in hospital, and they found out, they diagnosed that it was a heart attack. And when they did my angiogram, is when they stick a camera, from your artery and your wrist goes up into your heart, and all my arteries were severely blocked. I already knew I had high cholesterol, but this was obviously it's a hereditary case that I never had, and so many men in their late 40s and 50s just drop down dead, going for a jog or whatever, because they don't know they've got a heart problem. And I was just so lucky. So, and I had a triple bypass. 9 weeks after my triple bypass, I was playing football for my local church, which was something I committed to do.
Is the triple bypass, is that the big one? Like the sort of the one that's more dangerous?
Open heart, yeah. That's an open heart surgery. That's when they saw your breastbone down the middle, and crack it open. It's the pain. I mean, I've had a few broken bones, and the pain is kind of there for a shorter time. This was quite intense for a long time, but I've got a pretty good tolerance of pain nowadays. So.
Well, I had an operation on my bladder and bowel where they had to cut part of my bowel to place it on my bladder to make my bladder bigger, and so there was no bones cut there, but just the fact they opened my stomach up, I could not walk for about a week just from the pain of that. So having your breastbone sawed in half just sounds insane. Although I'd imagine the morphine would have been
horrific. It was horrific. You can, if you go on YouTube, you can watch it and you hear the saw when they cut.
Sorry,
I watched it before the operation.
You watched it before?
I watched it before my operation.
You numpty.
That wasn't smart.
Well, the thing is, I was a fairly new Christian, and I just put my faith that God would put the right surgeons there that would look after me, and they did, and I made a textbook recovery. I was up and walking. I had an operation on a Thursday afternoon, and I was home on the Monday night, and I was up and around and walking on the Sunday. So
I know you're not a doctor, but I want to ask this because I'm now confused. You had 3 heart attacks.
6.
No, but in one day you had 3 heart attacks.
Yeah.
What is a heart attack? I thought a heart attack was automatic. You're down and out.
That's what people would think, and that's what you think. But I'll describe it as, if you're driving down the road and you're doing a little bit too fast, and you suddenly see some blue lights in your mirror, and you think, oh no, they've got me, and you get that kind of rush of adrenaline as you put your brake on. That feeling, you know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And so it was kind of like that adrenaline feeling, and I had the funniest I had pain in my arm, and I didn't really have pain in my chest. It was in my back and in my teeth, giving me a headache, and it just felt weird. I just felt really, really weird, and it kind of went, and it was there for about 20 minutes, and it went away. And then it came back again. So I did that 3 times, whilst I was just sat at my desk at work. So it was not what you would you're expecting to clutch your chest and roll about on the ground and, and be in immense pain. It was painful, but it wasn't the way I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. So, but I could recognize it now, that's for sure.
So have you ever had a panic attack before?
Sorry,
Have you ever had a panic attack?
No.
Right, so
no, I've never had panic attacks or anything like that. So it probably feels a bit like a panic attack.
Yeah,
I think people have said,
So I've had panic. I've got a panic disorder, so I have panic attacks pretty regularly, and that sounds a lot like what I feel. So now you've got me anxious.
Oh, for God's sake!
Well, I would always recommend get your cholesterol tested. Make sure your blood pressure is tested regularly, because my cholesterol was high. I already knew that from when I was about 38. But I wasn't on any drugs for it. But then when my blood pressure started going up and I was getting tired, the doctors never put the 2 and 2 together, which is daft. So if you've got high blood pressure and high cholesterol, then you need to get properly checked out. That's my advice.
Mm-hmm. So I think we need to stop interviewing anybody that's had any sort of medical issue, because every time we do that, I get anxious.
Well,
I'm a total hypochondriac. We interviewed somebody that survived a stroke and sort of taught themselves how to speak and sort of use their body again. Yeah. And for like a week afterwards, I was just like, oh no, I'm having a stroke. This is what a stroke feels like. Oh God. So I need to stop asking anybody about medical issues.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Definitely. It's keep off Google. That's the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So
can I ask, and this may come across as annoying, but did you make any sort of life changes after that, after the triple heart bypass, or did you just put all your faith in God from then on?
Well, during the actual process and that, it was my faith that, for me, that got me through. But because I wasn't scared at all. Apart from the night I was diagnosed, I was scared, but I kind of felt a calmness. I felt a message saying I was going to be all right. And I know if you're not a believer, that would sound really weird, but it's kind of like I was in the hospital 2 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep, and my wife sent me a text saying, "I don't know what's going on. I can tell you're not right. Don't worry, you're going to be all right. You can have a testimony out of this." And I did, and I've been on the Christian radio. I've given my testimony on there, and I've been on a couple of blogs. I've done my testimony about my story on Christian sites. So for me, it's the faith. But yeah, I do do try to eat healthy. I do try to do more exercise. And for a long while, I was doing really well. I'm again locked down. I've put on a stone, so I need to get back at it. So like everybody, I'm fat again. So I need to improve my lifestyle.
Well, do what I do. I still blame the school for not letting me do PE, but that was 12 years ago. So I need
beat you off it.
Yeah.
Was it? I feel the only reason I needed to ask you was just to sort of make sure, because you've probably heard these stories where people like get into their heads that it's been a faith-based thing, and then they sort of make no changes afterwards. I feel like you've done a good thing there, at least for my sake. I feel like you have. So good.
Yeah. So my body is my temple.
There you go. Awesome.
I guess we should move on. How long have we been on?
46 minutes and 21 seconds.
Again, can we touch on some of the economic policies, some of the more financial stuff?
Yeah, can do.
So, just from a brief reading, it would be safe to say that you're not a socialist party. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. No, I don't. I don't think we're socialist. I don't. Yeah. No.
No hesitation there whatsoever. Perfect.
So what are some of the main sort of economic policies? I know you're for small government, and I know you're for defunding a lot of things. What are we talking about here?
I'm not. I think it's. I mean, economic-wise is not with our because I don't. I think it would be a long time where we were in position to be putting a budget together. So. But yeah, no, we are in favour of funding families, funding child funding, making sure that education has the right level of funding as well. Big believer in those areas, so they're the main ones. But I mean, our main thing is to get the economy moving again. After we also talk about not borrowing as much, because as a country, we've been borrowing, and it's not going to be sustainable. So we need to get a curb on the borrowing as a country, but also but tax allowances and breaks for families and things like that as well. Also, we're quite in favour of Scotland's environment and wanting to make sure that the environment is looked after as well.
So I'm quite a nerd, so I need to try and make sure that I don't go into questions that are just unfair. So I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't sound like elitist or anything. But would you say so? This is very hard to put into words without sounding like a dick. A lot of countries after big economic issues go down a Keynesian route, and what that means is they. I don't know if you know what that means, but I'm going to explain for people just in case.
I've studied economics a good few times, so yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, these explanations aren't just for you. These because we have listeners that are like not highly into politics and stuff, so we have to explain for everybody sort of thing.
Just a Keynesian economic model is where you put a lot of money into infrastructure and you try and recoup the money in ways of investment. So would that be the sort of the route that you would be thinking of going down if it was up to you?
To be honest, it's not something that I've really gone into much detail on. I'm not an economist, and it's not someone as a party we've got in-depth policies on. We're pretty new, and we've only focused on certain areas as such. Right. One of the things that is keeping us stronger at the moment is the fact that we're backed by a union, so in Westminster. So there is some possibility there. I mean, we've had austerity for a number of years, and that's that's likely to continue to pay for what we've been dishing out in this last year or so with the COVID and the recovery coming. But I do think the main thing is about getting the economy up and running, getting people back to work, getting the businesses back open, and trying to support trade and that as well. So, for us, it's definitely. I don't see building and borrowing to because for many years we've been borrowing and borrowing to build the infrastructure and the schools. That's been done. We need to pay back those debts now.
So the reason I asked that was because one of the main things I did see regarding economics. Sorry, I'm burping a lot. I'm needing to hide away from the mic. Was you're not in favour of UBI, and sort of my feeling is that the way things are going, there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of job losses, and I can't see an alternative to UBI without a lot of sort of destitution. And I was wondering sort of what you thought about that.
It's really. I'd say that's beyond me. I would. It's not my area of expertise at all, I'm afraid. So I'm not.
Well, you're the first person who's acknowledged that you don't know something and said it, because a lot of candidates just will try and come up with something on the spot.
Oh yeah, it's usually really uninformed. Sometimes.
I actually respect the fact that you've said, I don't know. I'm not going to answer the question.
No. I would if I could, but I'm not. I mean, I've studied economics, but as far as the right way to economically get us out of this, I think there's a lot more work I would need to do to be able to answer that question, unfortunately. But that's the truth. So
Fair enough.
Do you have anything else to finish off?
I don't have any more questions now.
Okay, right. We've reached the end of the podcast, Don. I have a wee thing I like to do at the end of these things. Yeah. Usually during like a hustings or a radio show, you'd be given like 2 or 3 minutes to like fix the world. Basically, a lot of the time that seems to happen. I'm going to ask, and I kind of hate the way that people do those things, but I do find it slightly entertaining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes to tell the world, of like why they should vote for you. So I'm going to do it right off the bat. Yeah. I'm going to give you a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then we'll start. So,
cool.
3, 2, 1, go.
So I aim to make a difference by speaking up for those who have no voice, by challenging the status quo and raising topics and subjects that those in the current Parliament at the moment, the Scottish Parliament, they dare not discuss or debate. Personally, I stand against all forms of racism and hatred, and I want to promote love and tolerance. I'm for equality and equity for all. Again, I'm against all forms of abuse and violence. I would be campaigning against those. And I want to encourage and support families and marriage wherever possible. I'd seek to improve education and help give our children the best start in life. And I would oppose what I believe is the age-inappropriate sex education content. When it comes to independence, I respect the decision from 2014, and I don't think it's the right thing, the right time. So I wouldn't be looking to support, the country get on its feet and focus on the economy and moving that right. But I also stand for religious freedom and the freedom to practice religion. And for freedom of speech. And as a practicing Christian, I do hold strong views and morals, but I believe overall that we should love our neighbours and our enemies no matter what. And that's me.
There you go. Awesome. That was 1 minute.
Thanks.
1 minute 30 there.
See, you're not meant to play that if he's not.
I don't need 2 minutes.
We just...
You just play that because you like playing that.
This is just a bit of fun, right? This is just a bit of fun. This is not serious, the end part here. Right, there you go. So that's 1 minute 30 seconds. We should put up a leaderboard at some point just to see.
Well, like a star in a reasonably priced car.
Like a Top Gear type thing. Aye. Amazing. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Don. That was much appreciated.
No, thank you for your time, and it's good to talk to you both.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So we'll let you go.
You're giving me stuff to think about as well, which is good. I like to be challenged.
Awesome,
so thank you.